Hello, good morning.
Good morning, Professor.
How are you folks? All right, let's get started then. Today we are starting our presentation session. We're going to start with the case that discusses how Apple manages its global supply chain. It is the case one. And well, I will handle the stage to you guys to start the presentation. Feel welcome and good luck. If you allow me, during your presentation, my intention is to make comments, to support you with additional comments and ideas, okay? Then we make the thing more dynamic.
Carol, você consegue compartilhar?
Okay. All right, so hello everyone, good morning. Our group is going to present the Apple Incorporation. So let's start.
So first, we decided to do a little trajectory of the Apple. So we highlighted the most important points. They had a drop in sales of the Macintosh, licensing the Mac operating system to third-party manufacturers, putting Apple's future in question. In 1997, they established a partnership with Microsoft. In 1998 to 2001, they launched the iMac, which the line sold well, gaining better control over the supply chain by working with new suppliers, launching a series of new products with significant technologies advancement. And in 2007 to 2014, Apple's success with these music players developed the application store called the Apple Store. And in 2010, they launched the iPad, which was really important for the development of the brand.
Now, when we take a look at the new product development, how Apple manages it, it's pretty fast. So when we see the supply chain, the Apple supply chain is completely global. It's present in more than 156 countries. The R&D that it expands is going to be 4.5 billion. That's data for 2013. It's a little old right now, but it's just growing. As we can see in this graph on the right, the R&D is just keeps growing from year to year. We have 6.2% of the revenues going for R&D only. It's designed and engineered in California, while the assembly is mainly in Asia and China. While Apple has this type of strategy of getting the retail stores branded, so we can add value also to what's going to deliver to the customers. Now, it's engineered and designed, as I said before, and this new technology development, various licenses for intellectual property, and Apple works with acquisition of firms, so it tries to buy the firms before they grow into competitors. And today, it's going to be designed in California, as we can see on the left. Then it spreads for the rest of the world what Apple plans to do. So we can see in South Korea, Samsung is responsible for memory and applications processors. In the United States, they have this flash memory. In Japan, they have the production of Bluetooth and Wi-Fi components. So we can see it's very globalized, and it's an effect of the globalization nowadays. And everything is going to be brought to China in Shenzhen, where they're going to produce the final product and spread to the world. So basically, iPhone supply chains like that, but we can apply that for other types of Apple products. And what we saw and what they use that's really interesting, it's called the lean thinking, how the company tries to make efficient defect identification. So it's very rare to do reprocessing or need to improve a product in the middle of the line. So they want to mitigate risk at a maximum. And while the strategy that Apple applies, it's about increasing the flow and creating a unique product line. So we usually are used to have special products for Apple. We have to compulsorily buy at Apple things. So it's their strategy to make a streamlined supply chain and make people very dependent on that. When we see the differences between Apple and the traditional business, we see that Apple has a short cycle of development, while traditional business takes 4 to 5 years to develop a new product. The internal and external stakeholders have a wide variety, so Apple depends on lots of them. That gives them more practicality and also more complex system. And the traditional business usually has few and long-established stakeholders. So they are partners and they work together, but it's not so fast and not so complex as Apple. When we see at Apple, the teams work together in a coordinated way. So they said in the text that usually people would design something new and they would directly send to the producers, the manufacturers. So there was a close relationship between the teams. While the traditional outsourcing usually goes pretty separately from what's going on from the core business. The internal control of the supply chain is held inside Apple, while external control is usually opted for traditional business. The designers, as I said before, they work closer to suppliers, so they have this fast communication and information exchange, while traditionally outsourcing is pretty detached. And R&D is going to be highly integrated and centralized for the whole company, while the traditional business, it's all separate departments and some profits and efficiency can be lost along the way. This is the many iPhone versions. As you can see, how Apple changes a lot over time and how it always tries to make a new product pretty soon.
Now we're going to talk a little bit about the procurement part. You can go to the next slide. When we see Apple's procurement strategy, we can resume it in a macro point, which is maintain control over suppliers by working in a closed ecosystem. They do this very well. And a few things or pillars that support this is first, differentiated programs in the market for suppliers. So this consists of even providing capital equipment for their suppliers, which means even buying improvements for machines or other assets for productions in exchange for assurance that they'll get their supply exclusivity and achieve their target costs so they can negotiate better. Also, they try to purchase suppliers' capacity in advance. So by that, they can reserve all the suppliers' capacity and then they won't sell to their competitors. That gives exclusivity for Apple. Another thing they do is constant revision over inventory levels, demand forecast, and cost of components. So they're constantly trying to get better levels of each of one of those factors while they do their procurement. And at last, the Apple employees working close to manufacturers. So as Carol already mentioned, their designers, engineers all stay very close to the manufacturers so they can have a better control of actually what they're buying as components and influencing directly the production through the design. You can go to the next slide. And if we take a look at this procurement strategy, what is beneficial for Apple? So 3 main points. First, flexible manufacturing volume when needed. So Apple sometimes has high demand for a few products. And by having this controlled procurement environment, they can just get those suppliers and force a few moments that the strategy is increased, the production is increased. And then also they're able to negotiate large discounts. So by having those strategies defined with the suppliers, they can have larger margins to negotiate due to the exclusivity they have with the suppliers. And also they save on other supply chain costs. So by having their exclusive suppliers, they don't have to spend with, I don't know, different air freights for different companies, but they focus on exclusive ones. Next slide. Here's just a a list of a few of Apple's key suppliers. You can see Samsung, which is very famous, Foxconn here, and the last one, which is also a big one. You see that they differentiate on different parts for the computers. And this is just a list of the key ones. In the case, you can see a list of 156 different suppliers for different components. So even though they try to focus on specific suppliers, they have a very big range, which is actually pretty impressive. Next slide. And something that is interesting, this is just a little part from the text showing an example of flexibility during high demand regarding the company Foxconn, which is one of their suppliers. So if you want to read the text, but just resuming what is said there, it was one time when they needed an increase in supply, and then Foxconn, which is a supplier for Apple, which is directly exclusive for Apple, they woke up around 8,000 workers during night. At midnight, gave them a few snacks, and then just turned them into a 12-hour shift to produce nearly over 10,000 iPhones a day when they were launching a new campaign. And this is an example of how fast they can do this, but also it comes a critic, which we're going to mention in the end, which involves a little bit of worker abuse, but just mentioning just to see how fast they can do when they control their supplies. You can go to the next one. And at last, regarding the procurement strategy, we can take a look at the pros and cons for the suppliers, not Apple. So a few pros, they can guarantee a profit by high volume. So Apple is a very big company. They have high volume. They have constant sales. So that's a guaranteed sales for the suppliers in themselves. And also they have this opportunity for investment in capital equipment. So Apple actually invests in their producing technology, in their machines, etc. And the cons, which a few suppliers actually rejected Apple when they gave some offers, includes expected breakdown costs, labors, and profit. This means that all the suppliers have to report constantly for Apple everything they do, so including the costs, their labor, and how their profit margins are. Also, they need extra inventory when needed. So due to the high demand that Apple has, sometimes they have to prepare themselves to deliver those components ahead. Also, Apple really extends the cycle of the payables they have. So on the other side, the suppliers have really long receivable cycle, up to 90 days to get paid for the things they produce. And at last, they have a lower ability for client diversification. So since they focus only on Apple, they have to spend a lot of time and effort producing and also capacity producing for Apple. They have to increase the ability to get other clients. And this is the resume for the procurement strategy.
All right, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about the assembly of Apple's products. Next slide. So the assembly is usually done by Foxconn in Taiwan. Obviously, there are some other companies that do help with the process, but the main the assembly mostly goes on at Foxconn. So Samsung, Nokia, and BlackBerry are all also Foxconn clients, meaning that every big phone company also uses the same company, and why wouldn't they? It's cheaper than producing it in the US, and mostly it's a good outsourcing option because it means you don't have to have a warehouse with a bunch of machines and other technologies to build your product, and you can also pay workers a lot less out in China than you can in the US. This has the downside of being hard on communication sometimes. So, for example, tests are very hard to do because things such as the camera for the iPhone 5 has to go through a battery of tests, and sometimes it's tests that Foxconn are not properly equipped to do. So they need to send in engineers, need to send in other personnels, and this coordination can get complicated. So that's one of the main downsides. Next slide. So I'm going to give you an example of the iPhone 5 with Flextronic. They hired a bunch of workers, brought in from other countries around China to be able to test this product. So this goes with what Andres said about flexibility, right? They can kind of hire and fire workers depending on their demand pretty quickly. So it's very useful to have that. However, so they also worked high shifts for a rather low pay. So all of this is very good for Foxconn as well as Apple that can pay rather low price to assemble their products than they would have in the US or in their own factories, because again, the cost of maintaining all that is very high. In this case, Apple can focus solely on design because that's what Apple is. It's a design company. It's not a hardware company per se. A lot of their components come from other other companies such as Samsung or even Foxconn. So Apple can focus solely on designing and the things that, which is what makes them stand out in the market, and things that other people can do for them better than them for cheaper, for a low cost than them, they let these other companies do. Next slide, please. However, this also comes with the downside of communication. So for example, the workers that were hired in 2012 to produce the iPhone were laid off in January of 2013. So a couple of months later, this goes with the concept of flexibility. They can hire and lay off as many workers as they want whenever they want. But this also comes with public backslash because whilst this is acceptable in China, big countries such as the US don't follow the same ideals. So Apple's protection is their kind of supplier code of conduct. That means that the supplier should follow X and Y policies to make sure that they are in line with Apple's values. And that's kind of the main protection that they have against these types of malpractices, let's say, because this lets them have the benefit of paying low cost, of not having to focus on assembly. And at the same time, if something goes wrong, we can just point to that code of conduct and say it's not our fault. The outsourcer wasn't in line with our values. The other problem with this is that they use a just-in-time supply chain. So that means that when operations are interrupted, such as if too many workers are fired or if you have a PR crisis, they might delay production because since they don't want to have a lot of stock, which is actually understandable if you're using very delicate components such as iPhone parts, which can break easily and which are probably very hard to maintain. You would want to use a just-in-time supply chain to limit how much stock you have, and also make your operations more a little quicker, the cycle of your operations a little quicker. But that also means that any delays on one part of a supply chain can cause a huge bottleneck that'll disrupt the whole operation. So if anything goes wrong at any point, you're going to have a bottleneck and it's going to be hard to meet the delays. But it's also easier it has its advantages in the work market as well. So as we said, they could bring in engineers from neighboring countries, from China, to do the assembling. This is something that you simply can't do in the US because due to labor rights, due to laws, due to the culture, it's a lot harder to hire a bunch of engineers for a very low price as they can do in China and other countries. They can take them from there, from the workplaces around them, bring them to China and just fire them after. It's a bigger market with a better know-how for these kind of operations, which makes it very profitable for them to use Foxconn as an outsourcing option. Next slide.
So now regarding Apple's logistics, you can pass, please. Yes. Apple, differently from many other producers, uses air deliveries to meet their demands and always guarantee their warehouses to be full in order to meet the demand. Basically, they use innovative measures, and also another strategy is the exclusivity measures, which means that an example is that in 1997, they secured a whole fleet of air deliveries, and some of their competitors couldn't even hire air deliveries. So that meant that Apple was the only one to deliver during the holidays, and that made a huge advantage for them. And they also rely on partner warehouses from like UBS, FedEx, so that they don't need to have all the warehouses, but they do need to have an extensive retail network so that they can always reach the consumers in time, and they rely on partners for that. You can pass. So another one of the most important characteristics of Apple's logistics is their reverse logistics method of working. Basically, Apple guarantees, closely manages the warranty, the trade-ins, and the reuse programs for their consumers. So instead of consumers going to the store and returning the products, and then they have a whole bureaucratic process, Apple consumers can just go to the website, file their complaint, and then throw in their number, the serial number of the product, and then in half a day, they will have the notice of whether they are still warranted by Apple and if they can still change the products. And if they are, in 2 days' time, they will receive a box to return the product. And all it takes for one of the delivery partners is a call. It's a call to the delivery center, and then they will go pick up your product, and then Apple will send it to one of their warehouses to, whether it is to fix the product and send it back, or it is to fix it. If it's a critical problem, they'll just fix it and then send a new one and sell the old one. So that means they reuse a lot of what happened wrong by closely managing this logistics process. Instead of they reuse a lot, and there's less waste. So this also increased consumer satisfactions and loyalty, because consumers know that if anything goes wrong, Apple will be there to help them. And they can also sell their old products to Apple, so that Apple will refurbish them and sell it again in the market as still an Apple and a good as new. And another aspect of the logistics, is that Apple closely manages, like I was saying, the whole logistic process. They have plain boxes so that people don't really know that it's Apple, so it's safer for them to transport. And they have a policy of having cameras and closely monitoring of their employees every place that the box goes through, that the products go through, from warehouses to ships to ports and all those kinds of stuff. So that guarantees a very successful and effective logistics process.
And now I'm going to talk about Apple's retail experience. Apple has 424 retail stores in 16 countries, and also the online shopping is available in 39 countries. The retail stores are typically located in high traffic locations, in quality shopping malls. And those stores stand out by high quality buying experience, like simplifying the presentation of all the products of the company. In addition, the employers that work in the retail stores are all experienced and know a lot about Apple's products. And the company defines the production forecast according to the summary of the day. Next slide, please. Apple is investing in its supply chain as always, such as investing in new technologies like assembly robots and milling machines, turning the production more quickly and more cost effectively.
So now we have something to question, which is the impacts of downstream verticalization. In the case for Apple, is downstream into retail. So they actually almost, component parts in manufacturing, they have suppliers, but they control this part. But they do the assembly and the retail, which is something that they started over the years. A few benefits of this strategy is agility and flexibility in supply chain. So they have a better flow between those supply chain parts. They can pass from one to another. They can control demand and supply in a more efficient way. Also, they have a better control over costs, so they know how they're spending each department in each part of the supply chain. And for this case, since we're talking about retail, they have direct contact with customers. In this case, it can be a benefit if you know what you're doing. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And the risks are increased complexity and expertise needed. So, and then the question is, can it be applied to other industries? It's a very trivial question, and it really depends if you know what you're doing. So, this strategy of going to retail for Apple worked because they had a good marketing strategy. They knew very well their customers, how their customers interacted, what were their desires, as Jane just explained. The employees are very well prepared to get the customers and know their product very well. So if you go slowly and you try to develop the retail process and with lots of know-how and expertise, you can be very successful. But I know there's lots of companies that try to do this verticalization forward, so go into the retail and didn't have any success because it wasn't very well planned. They got so complex with their operations that they started having losses instead of profit. So the answer is it depends. There's not a rule, but it mainly depends on how you're going to implement it and the know-how you have to do it. Next slide.
All right. Now talking about the outsourcing, we all said good things about Apple, how it's all flowers, but there's some problems with outsourcing and how it established the strategy from all those years. So today we have these threats of the outsourcing process, and we have this highly efficient supply chain, but some other competitors are also rising with Apple. It's bringing Apple is growing, but it's bringing everybody together with it. So it's going to enter a clash in the future. So let's take a look at what happened. Samsung Electronics, as the group said, and Foxconn were the main suppliers of Apple, mainly for manufacturing in Asia. Samsung was responsible for production of the essential features such as screens, flash, DRAM memories, and everything that puts added value to the Apple's end product. So how this happened, and it's because Samsung grew so much depending on Apple and its revenues that it started to produce its own product. So that's how appeared the S3. As for the Galaxy Note, so Samsung got so much revenue, so much profit that it decided to create its own and compete directly with Apple. And that's the fact that Apple and Samsung are together in a constant fight nowadays. For Foxconn, it was responsible for assembling all the main products too, but it decided to compete against Apple in another way, in a more indirect way. So they created this venture capital hardware accelerator. So nowadays, if something appears of an idea of hardware, the Foxconn is going to apply money into that to grow the profits when this business succeeds. So Foxconn wants to create and help other brands to grow and be as compatible as Apple. So that's a huge problem that Apple had while outsourcing. The second problem would be the loss of human capital. Believe it or not, most of the knowledge about the services and the brand, it's nowadays sourced in India. And why India? Because the group said that it's going to be cheaper, the labor force, raw materials, and the labor laws are weaker in India and China. So Apple has spent a lot of time putting money into those countries. So the knowledge today is all in those countries, is not belonging all to Apple. Although it's related to those countries, it doesn't belong to the business alone, Apple business alone. So we can see the telemarketing, if you call Apple, it's going to be someone from India that's going to answer, and it's not necessarily again from California or the United States. When we see the software development, the great heads are going to be on India and not only on the United States as we thought it was. So that's a problem that can develop into the future. And that's something that Apple has to take a look at. But when we see the benefits of outsourcing, it's all that we had in procurement strategy classes, such as the cost reduction Apple has from outsourcing India, China, specialization in the core functions, such as the design and creation of software, while the flexibility, scalability, and competitiveness are going to be much larger if you outsource nowadays. this is an example of the outsourcing and how it happens. So everything goes from the US and spreads around the world. The manufacturing, warehousing, distribution, barely anything works due to the US. Everything's like spread and independent of the US orders. And we see the distribution for the global customers. So it's almost everything is outsourced nowadays. So it allows high flexibility, as Andrea said before. Some future prospects and critiques that the group discussed is that Apple may increase the investment in AI. That's something that's investing with Siri, but it's going to increase from the next decades because of this huge trend. And also there are some things that Apple can't control exactly. For example, in 2021, the second semester of this year, Apple will not be able to control a problem with chips production, chips manufacturing. And something that is going to affect all the cell phone manufacturers, but it's something that Apple can control even if it holds a global supply chain. It's probably going to happen in the next semester. They are not sure if this is going to be a decline in revenue because they're not going to be able to produce all the iPads and MacBooks it's going to launch on June. So it's going to, we don't know exactly how it's going to happen. And as we said before, this is increasing sustainability in supply chain because Apple became famous in the last months of elimination of harmful chemicals. And it's one of the first manufacturing industries to remove these chemicals and improve the environment. But at the same time, it's also a target for labor abuse in China and other countries with less rigid labor laws. So that makes Apple a very visible target due to the profits and size, similar to what happened with Zara and the scandal of slavery. So it's easy to point at Apple and say, well, you're doing it wrong. But it takes a lot to understand and to see what's happening in each country and what's Apple is responsible and what Apple is not. But it's something that's very polemic and should be taken care of in the next years. It has a supplier code of conduct, for example, labor and human rights, health and safety, but it's not always followed by the countries. And just for curiosity, there's some supply chain lessons from Steve Jobs. And he says, customer always comes first, and cost cutting, it can be reducing the number of employees, the raw materials, it always comes second. So he always puts the consumers at the first place. Second, it's impossible, set impossible targets. So it's the only way that your company can get better. You have to prioritize action over just thinking or just acting theory. You just have to go there, act, and improve your business. 4, adopt a process view. So understand everything as a flow in the supply chain. 5, simplify product and process. So make it simple, make it few products and sell your best. Put some quality in that. Number 6, make a radical change when it's necessary. So it's also on the lean thinking. Whenever you need to make a change, go there and do the change before it escalates into something bad. And 7, you have to enhance this relationship between people via meetings, and you have to talk to them and have this sustainability and personal talk with each other. That's important for the business. With that, we end the presentation. Thank you very much. Do you have any doubts?
Well, I don't know, guys, if you colleagues, if you have any comments, I will open to questions and then I make mine. Any question, any comment, folks, from you to the group? No problem. Well, I wanted to make some comments first, congratulations. I guess you guys put the rule in a very high level to the other groups. It was a very, very, very nice presentation, well described. You guys explained it very well. The session of the slides is clear, clean, very good. I like it a lot. Congratulations. And well, I guess you brought several additional things that were not directly inside the case, which is very healthy to the class. I wanted to start with a question that André posed during his second speech, which was can it be applied to other industries, when he was talking about the way Apple was managing Apple manages its supply chain. That's a very fair question. I mean, I guess we have several things behind what Apple does regarding supply chain management. Look, they don't have in-house almost anything related to upstream supply chain. I mean, when we talk about manufacturing, production, and other stuff related to this, almost everything is outsourced, right? They outsource everything. What they have is a very strict coordination. They have a very strict coordination. They produce one thing, just one thing they produce in-house in Cupertino, in California, which is the intelligence, the software, right? The design of the product. So they keep in-house the core business. When we talk about the upstream supply chain, the relation between Apple and suppliers and manufacturing, they outsource everything. They handle to third party everything, but they keep in-house, I would say basically the two main important aspects for Apple's products, which are software and design. This is very nice to understand. And on the other hand, they integrate, when we make the assessment downstream the supply chain, I mean, how Apple manages distribution and sales, we see that Apple is kind of adopting I would say controversial strategy, because they integrate, they have their own stores, right? They have their own retail. And this idea makes me to think that they consider sales as a core activity. Actually, they are not just a technology firm and technology organization. They are also a retailer. They are also a trader. They sell their products. And this is very amazing to see, because I mean, it's unusual to have an industry. Apple, at the end of the day, is an organization that manufactures things. It's unusual to see a industry with endpoints in contact with end customers. I mean, it's not usual to see industries having their own stores to sell the product directly to the customers, and Apple does that. And that takes me again to the question: can it be applied to other industries? Talking specifically on the way Apple manages the downstream supply chain, I guess we have some cases in other industries that's worth mentioning. I've mentioned to you guys during this course the case of JBS here in Brazil, with the Swift stores, the ones that like barbecue and so on, probably are familiar with that. JBS is an industry as Apple is, but JBS is a food industry, and they have their own stores. They sell their products directly, and as Apple does, they collect valuable information from the customers, right? If they are selling, they are collecting all the data on customer behavior, right? And they can use these data to ultimately revamp, manage, coordinate the supply chain all over upstream. So for me, this is the most, I would say, interesting thing in Apple's, in this case, about Apple. Other thing that's very important, very interesting, I guess it was Gabriel, or it was Andre that said, Andre actually presented how Apple makes the procurement, or at least part of the procurement was presented by Andre, and he mentioned something that we explored in this course, which is bargaining power. Bargaining power. Apple is a strong organization within the supply chain. What they do, they use their bargaining power, mostly their cash power, to tie the supplier. They finance the suppliers. Even with a program of providing equipment in exchange to products. It's basically a scamble, basically a barter, right? They pay for the products that they will buy from the suppliers with equipment. It's very interesting to see they invest in the suppliers. And Carolina, I guess, mentioned, on the other hand, the risk of this type of strategy. I mean, Apple is at the end of the day, Apple is strengthening the supply chains. They are teaching the suppliers, the players within the supply chain, how to work in high level, which ultimately can be a weapon to the competitors, right? Competitors can bring in, can join the supply chain, can approach the players that are part of the supply chain and try to collect advantages from the supply chain by basically buying high quality products that were ultimately incentivized or boosted by Apple. So this is the risk. And on this topic that Carolina rightly highlighted, I invite the group that represent the last case on Toyota to bring a parallel, because Toyota's strategy is pretty much the same. Actually, Toyota's strategy is even more risky from a knowledge standpoint, because Toyota's strategy in the past, when they started to work in the United States, was to share all the knowledge that they have on production with the suppliers, which is basically something dangerous, because information is a valuable resource, right? The way we do the things, the tacit way we do the things, is quite valuable. And I mean, Toyota had they were so confident that the competitors could not understand how Toyota did the things within the supply chain, that they simply shared information with the supply chain. So I invite the group that represent the last case on Toyota to make a parallel with this case presented by our colleagues here about Apple. What else? I took note here. Yeah, basically, guys, you touched all the major points, and you've been beyond. Let me see if I have any other note that I would like to share with you. Oh yeah, of course. I guess it was, let me take my notes here. I guess it was Mateus, if I'm not wrong, mentioned about the risk of disruption of the supply chain, This is a risk that is present in all the supply chains. I mean, all the supply chains, all the players that are integrated in a network, in a supply chain, have concerns about being not supplied or not fulfilled with the products that they expected to receive. When we have lack of products within a supply chain, lack of material within a supply chain, we name it as supply chain disruption. Supply chain disruption. And this discussion comes with the idea of just in time, which the material makes a smooth approach. The material at some moment during the text, it says that Apple works in a just-in-time model. What is just-in-time? I make the question to you guys, to the group and to the rest of the class. What is just-in-time in few words?
It's limiting the amount of stock you have.
Exactly, Gabriel. It's basically to operate with low levels of stock. But some scholars, some researchers, some executives say that this is not quite possible. Why? Apple works in a just-in-time model. We understand that Apple has low level of stocks. But when we access the supply chain as a whole, the entire supply chain, we're gonna easily notice that someone is carrying these stocks. You know what I mean? Apple is not working with stock. They don't have cost of stock. They are not carrying physical products because they are just in time. But it's not simply like that. Just in time requires a very strict, a very sharp coordination, all over the supply chain. So to protect the supply chain against the risk of disruption, eventually we have players within the supply chain that carry the stock that the main firm is not carrying. This is the case in Apple's supply chain. At some point in the text, it is mentioned that Apple doesn't carry stock. Apple works in just in time, but the suppliers carry stock. They bear the cost of the stock. Everybody, I guess, we are on the same page when I say that stocks bear with them cost. I invested to produce stocks, so I put money to produce stocks, and that money is stuck in the format of stocks. Okay, someone is carrying those stocks. Why someone is carrying those stocks? Just to make sure that the supply chain will not be disrupted. Okay, this is a very important approach. This is a very important approach, and we need to be very skeptical when we see someone saying that one is working in a just-in-time model. Okay, you as a firm, you are working just-in-time model, but who is carrying the stock for you? Because someone is carrying the stock. It's quite impossible today to believe that everybody within the supply chain is working in a just-in-time model, because I mean, any impact, any shake in the supply chains will cause supply chain disruption. Other thing that I would like to highlight, actually, I would like to bring a bit on politics to this discussion on global supply chains. Apple maybe is one of the most highlighted cases today when we talk about supply chain, global supply chain management. If you remember, guys, it's not a long time ago, I would say months ago, when Trump was still the president of the United States, we've heard from him, I would say several times, that he would tag American organizations that concentrated production abroad. He was referring to all the companies that work in a global supply chain as Apple. Why he doesn't? Why he defended this idea? Because he wanted in his mind the best would be to bring the production inside the United States in order to generate employment. When you outsource the production to someone abroad in Asia, which is more common, you are at the end of the day creating jobs abroad on behalf of a lower cost. Global organizations need to be aware and need to be, they need to be aware about the risks of a change in the politics. I mean, if we change the president, depending on the country, if you change the Congress, if you change the governor, eventually these new chief will eventually establish some rules that may affect the business, mostly the ones that are made in a global level. So this is, again, a new risk of disruption that global organizations need to be to bear in mind. And to finish, guys, my comments, I would like to take advantage of what Carolina said at the end of her presentation when she highlighted the importance of the sustainability in global change. Okay, she said that Apple has a strict code of conduct to teach and to manage the suppliers and all the supply chain that works to serve Apple. And this is a trend, right? This is a trend. Carolina mentioned the case in the garment industry, mentioned specifically Zara, which garment industry always faced problems related to labor exploration. Okay, not saying that the complaints are true or not, but I'm saying that the image of those firms have been strongly affected over the time, mostly because of the way suppliers manage the labor force. This is very, very important. I mean, although Apple is not directly responsible for the workforce in the Foxconn factories, for example, you bet that if Foxconn faces labor issues, the responsibility will be, at least the public responsibility will be, all on Apple's shoulders. Okay. There is no discussion on this. There is no discussion on this. Okay. We see here in Brazil, we see the relation between Brazil and Europe when we talk about food and sustainability, right? You see some last week, we saw a group of European firms, retail firms like Tesco and Salinsberg and other ones, saying that, hey, Brazil, if you don't take care of your agricultural production, I mean, if you don't start to show us that to show to the world that you produce in a sustainable way, we're gonna boycott you. We're gonna stop buying from you, food from you. I'm not sure if it's possible, but they are threatening. And again, we have a matter of compliance here. And more, we have the private sector, I mean, the firms, the organizations trusting the government. This is, I guess, is the last message that I would like to send you. When we see that Apple has a strict code of conduct to the supply chain, it means that Apple doesn't make deals when certain rules are not being respected. And this is for all the global companies, not only of technology, not only Apple, but Samsung, but Microsoft, in the food industry, in the hard equipment industry. All the multinationals, the global organizations are strongly based on compliance rules, and this is healthy for the society because, I mean, they make the society to respect certain global rules. Among them, we cannot explore the labor force. We need to give conditions to the labor force to work with dignity. We need to respect the environment, the natural resources, etc., etc., etc. So this is the last message that I would like to highlight from Carolina, because for me this is very, very important. Any comment, folks? Any question? Lucas, please.
Professor, I have a question about if these factories in Asia, when Apple probably they make them sign a non-disclosure agreement, right? So is it effective to use this kind of contracts in Asian countries where maybe legislation is not so effective as Eastern countries?
This is a good question. If I will ask the help from the colleagues that presented the case. I guess we don't have anything in the case, right, guys, on that topic. I don't remember by heart, but I don't think that there is a mention on this.
Yeah, I don't think.
Oh, you can see.
Yeah, I don't remember. Actually, I don't remember to see this in the paper, but I will answer your question, Lucas, with experience that I have. Okay, all the global firms, at least in the Western side of the world, not in the Eastern, but the Western. I mean, American, European, Western European companies, they have or they use MOUs to set up a first general agreement with suppliers, with customers, with R&D firms. What is an MOU? It's a memorandum of understanding, right? MOU. It's a very first agreement between two parties, and in this agreement they bring several general conditions related to disclosure of information and related to compliance, basically. Okay, this is very, very common in the Western business world. Not sure it's common for the Eastern world, for the Asian companies. I believe it is. I believe it is. For example, for Japanese firms, I know that it is. I've already dealt with some Japanese firms, and they work just like any Western firm related to compliance to rules and to assurance of compliance subjects. Okay, the non-disclosure agreement you mentioned, it is much more related to it is to make sure that the firms will not disclosure key information during a process of integration or more deeper business. I mean, if I will make deals with you and I need to get access to internal information from your firm, we probably will sign off a non-disclosure agreement to make sure that we're not gonna lack key information from each other. But to meet the requirement of compliance and general rules of that everybody needs to respect in order to be in compliance with the societies that they are working with, the best document is generally a MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding. As soon as the Memorandum of Understanding is signed, the deals, the negotiations evolve. Eventually, two organizations will sign off a trade contract, supply contract. And in that contract, it will be highlighted the rules that both parties need to follow related to compliance issues. Okay, for example, in the firms that I've worked for during those years, one of the last clauses of any contract was a anti-corruption and sustainability clause. It was a general set of clauses saying what the supplier could not do in order to preserve the compliance, sustainability, and workforce values. Okay, I'm not sure if I answered your question. And Apple, of course, they have this, by the way, through the code of conduct.
Okay, I understand.
Okay. If you go through any global organization, guys, and you, for example, you type in Google, compliance JBS, compliance Cargill, compliance Apple, you're gonna go directly to the firm's web page related to compliance, and there you're gonna find generally very rich documentation and guidance on compliance. All the suppliers and customers, they need to follow that. In agribusiness, this is very interesting in Brazil because we see the risk of deforestation, sustainability, etc. But at the end of the day, in addition to the public sector that sometimes doesn't have enough arms to monitor and to fight against deforestation and unsustainable actions, we have the private sector. Because all the customers of agribusiness in Brazil, of the products, food, biofuels, etc., most of them are multinational organizations with strong compliance rules. So they establish the rules according to the global standards, So I get very comfortable, for example, when I hear in the television, in the news, discussions on soybean production in the Amazon biome. For me, it doesn't happen, or it is a very small, or it happens eventually in a very small scale. Why? Because the global buyers and the national buyers as well, like BRF, JBS, all the food industries, they don't buy soybeans from deforested regions from 2008. So they have satellite image and they monitor these through a specific document. And they simply don't buy. The farmer needs to present that. If he presents this document and this area is deforested after 2008, this is a illegal area, and then he cannot sell the product. He cannot get money from the Brazilian banks, international banks like Santander, which is not Brazilian, but has a strong presence in Brazil. They do not finance farmers and industries that make deforestation of the Amazonic biome. So the private sector has a important role in preserving the compliance values, in my opinion. Okay. Any other comments, my colleagues? Nope.
Professor,
Yeah.
I just had a curiosity, as you said before, is there any other business that does that? And I was doing some research, and I found that it's very difficult to have an industry exactly like Apple, like how big it is. Do you have a guess, or I don't know, do you have an example of something so big as Apple?
That manages the way Apple manages its global supply chain, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a hard question. I know local firms, like I mentioned, I guess JBS it's not from technology, but I guess they manage somehow like Apple. They have they don't produce the raw material that they need. I mean, the cattle, the poultry, the animals are produced by someone else. They just control in a strict way. And here I put JBS, but I also put BRF, Tyson in the United States, which is part of the JBS group. So the meat industry, I believe, they work similarly to Apple in managing upstream supply chain, the relation with the suppliers, but the relation with the distribution and customer relationship, for me, it's very unusual to see someone like Apple. Apple, for me, when Apple says that they have that amazing own stores, retail stores, this is quite unique. We don't have, I mean, in other industries, I don't remember by heart. Actually, Samsung has some stores, right? All over the world here in São Paulo, but not the same. It is not in the same fashion as Apple. When you enter in Apple's retail store, this is quite unique, right? I mean, you go to New York, London, or here in São Paulo, in Shopping Morumbi, it's the same structure, the same way, the way the sellers, the salesmen, saleswomen are dressed, the way they speak, the way they explain the product, it's unique. No matter if you are in New York, Chicago, or São Paulo. So I don't remember other firms that have this type of management towards the customer. Towards the suppliers, yes, I believe that we have examples, but towards the customer, I don't remember. Okay. For me, it's very, very unique. Any other questions, guys? No? Maria Eugênia, Carolina, André, Gabriel, Mateus, and Jenny, thank you very much for your presentation. It was very enriching. Again, it's a benchmark for the colleagues that we present in the next weeks. Okay, congratulations. I will make the check of the presence, and then I make you guys. I'll release you. Okay. For the ones I received some comments here in the chat. The ones that want to speak after the class, no problem, I'll be here. Okay, just a minute, let me open here the list, and we finish. I just before making the presence check, let me just see here the next case. The next case is on global sourcing at night. So we're gonna exactly talk about the garment industry, and we're gonna walk through a bit on what Carolina mentioned about the compliance related to labor force management within the suppliers, etc., etc. So this is also a very interesting case that brings the challenges of a firm like Nike to manage their production, which is as Apple quite spread over the world and very, very, very highly outsourced. Okay, so group 2 next week talk about global sourcing at night. All right. André is there. Arthur?
I'm here, Professor.
Okay. Bruna? Bruna? Bruno Carpinelli?
Here.
Bruno da Cunha, Bruno Henrique Leal da Cunha?
Here, my professor. Morning.
Hey, Bruno. Camila Freitas.
I'm here. Good morning, Professor.
Morning, Carolina. Camila. Carolina is there. Cristiano.
Hi, I'm here.
Diego. Diego. Fernando Tomé.
Here, Professor.
Okay. Gabriel is there. Gustavo. Hector.
Here, Professor.
Great, Hector. Isabella.
I'm here.
Okay, Jane is there. Juliana.
Here, Professor.
Okay. Lucas Lichan.
Hello, Professor.
Hello, Lucas. Lucas Bottini is there. Maria de Carvalho Fernandes.
Here, Professor.
Okay. Maria Eugênia is there. Maria Luisa dos Santos.
Here, Professor.
Okay. Marina.
I'm here, Professor.
Okay. Mario.
Hi, Daniel. What's up?
Hey, Mario. Fine, you. Matheus is there. Matheus is there. Matheus Guedes. Matheus Guedes is there. Matheus Alencastro Barros.
I'm here.
Okay. Matheus Guedes is there. Rafael is there. Renan.
Hi, Professor.
Hey, Renan. Roberto. Victor.
Professor, Roberto, I'm here. My connection is bad.
No problem, Roberto. Victor.
Yes. Hi, Professor.
Hey, Victor. And William. All right, folks. For the ones that doesn't want to talk anything else, have a great week and take care. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Professor. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, Professor. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Professor, we need to submit the essay from this presentation or not?
Yeah, the ones that are not part of the group that presented the case need to submit a summary of the case. Yes.
We have the entire day or the next week to do it?
Actually, you about related to the Apple's case. It was today.
No, the presentation from today. We need to submit until midnight, or we can do it for the next week.
No, you don't need, guys, to make a summary of the presentation. You just need to make a summary of the case. For example.
Oh, okay, the case.
You know.
Okay, but it's for today.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was the case related to Apple. This case that your colleagues presented should be submitted to up to 11, up to the beginning of this class, 11 a.m. today. The next one.
Okay, so I missed this presentation. It was like in the beginning of the class.
Yeah, it was
from
the same. Yeah, the same style.
This essay? I also missed it. I thought it was just a Dropbox for the presentation of the group. I thought it would be for next week. I'm sorry, but I wanted to know if this essay is going to be substituted as same as the others at the end of the semester.
Yeah, Hector.
Yes.
At the end of the semester, I will open one Dropbox for you to deliver whatever you missed. So of course it's not gonna account 100% of the grade, but I will consider a percentage of the grade. So I will open this Dropbox probably in the next week, and then you can send everything that you missed, including the summaries of the cases.
Perfect, Professor. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Thanks.
That was also my doubt. So gonna leave. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Professor, I was part of this group that I presented today, but can you listen? Because I can hear you very well. I don't know if you are talking far from the microphone. Not sure. I guess she disconnected.
It's a little muffled, I think, but I think I'm in the same group as Isabella. We have two people missing in our group that didn't show up. We couldn't reach them. So what do you suggest we do, Daniel? Just keep with the presentation, just us, or
just keep the presentation? Just keep the presentation. Divide the presentation among yourselves, guys, and let me know. Of course, I'm taking notes. I will see who didn't present. So keep your work among yourselves, okay? And
there's one person that was not originally in our group that asked to join us. Is it okay? Bruno Cunha.
Let me see here, because I
think he talked to you. He told me he talked to you.
Yeah, let me check here. Some colleagues actually joined the groups after I divided, but and guys, put the name of the ones that worked to construct the presentation and the PowerPoint in the PowerPoint, okay? You put your names, the authors of the presentation should be there, not the name of the people of the group. I mean, eventually someone didn't show up, you're not gonna put the name of this person in the presentation, okay?
Perfect.
Can you say again the name of the person?
Bruno Cunha.
Bruno Cunha. No, actually, Bruno Cunha. No, Bruno Cunha. I have Bruno Carpinelli in your group.
Yeah, there's another Bruno. I don't know. I'm gonna ask him to send you another email then.
Yeah, so please. Yeah, please. Yes, please. Because your group have already 8 people.
And 2 people haven't shown up. We haven't seen them at all. So
yeah. In this case, eventually he could join you. Ask him to get in touch with me through email, please, Isabella.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bom, professor, deixa eu ligar a câmera aqui. Posso falar assim em português ou você quer que fale em inglês?
Pode ser do jeito que você quiser, cara.
Não, só para falar. Então, acabei cometendo um erro ali de desatenção. Semana que vem eu vou ter feriado judaico. E eu tinha esquecido completamente.
Tá.
E eu falei até com o meu grupo que eu não vou conseguir apresentar e tudo mais, porque eu não consigo logar. Então, só queria te avisar. Se eu tivesse prestado um pouco de atenção antes, podia ter trocado de grupo. Mas é que meu pai tá bem doente, na verdade, tô com a cabeça em outro lugar, eu não consegui, sabe, eu não prestei muita atenção nas datas e acabou saindo um pouco do controle. Mas era só para avisar.
Você conversou com o seu grupo?
Eu avisei o pessoal, tipo, aí a gente já tem, obviamente, tem nossa divisão do caso, aí eu vou fazer minha parte da apresentação, vou ver se eu conecto com a pessoa que vai ser responsável por falar a minha parte, que eu falaria no domingo mesmo, antes do feriado, ou até na sexta-feira, para passar um pouco a bola para lá.
Tá
Mas
bom.
eu avisei o pessoal lá e acho que tá tudo bem.
Tá. Você consegue me mandar um resumo do caso?
Consigo, na boa.
Manda para mim, aí a gente, mais do que justificável aí a sua falta, eu considero a sua apresentação como sendo o resumo do caso, avalio a sua...
Combinado. Eu faço igual o o que eu faria, por exemplo, na entrega de agora, né? Como se não fosse para o grupo apresentador. Então eu envio lá e é isso aí. Tá bom. Valeu, professor.
Imagina,
Desculpa
cara.
aí se atrapalhou a logística aí.
Fica tranquilo. Boa sorte, um
Valeu.
abraço. Tchau, tchau.
Valeu.
Eu tava falando, aí eu caí, aí as pessoas começaram a falar, não quis interromper, me desculpe. Você consegue me ouvir?
Posso te ouvir? Tá um pouquinho ruim, mas vamos tentar, Maria. Eu acho que dá pra gente conversar.
Eu vou desconectar aqui do Bluetooth. Um minuto.
Professor, não desiste de mim. Deixa eu explicar o que é. Eu comprei
Agora
um
tá
fone
ótimo.
novo.
Não,
Eu
agora tá
comprei um
ótimo.
fone novo para trabalhar. E aí, só que toda vez que você toca no fone, aparentemente você sai da ligação, entendeu? Aí eu não tô acostumada ainda. Então, toda vez que eu ia tocar para desligar, eu saía da ligação. Então, foi muito difícil. Desculpa mesmo. Mas enfim, que bom que você não desistiu.
Tá
Ó,
bom.
deixa eu falar o que aconteceu comigo. A minha situação é a seguinte, meu grupo era esse, grupo 1. E aí, por diversas vezes, eu tentei, tipo, é porque eu não fui falar com ninguém especificamente, mas aí, tipo, durante as aulas eu perguntava, tem alguém do grupo 1 e tal, e também outra coisa, a gente tem um grupo no WhatsApp sobre a eletiva, não sei se você sabe, e todos os dias eu perguntava, tipo, semana passada eu fiquei perguntando, e ninguém do grupo 1 nem me acolheu, nem falou que conhecia, ninguém falou nada, eu não sabia que era ninguém também. E eu não fui falar com ninguém especificamente, eu falei no grupo e tal. Enfim, então o que aconteceu, eu não consegui fazer o trabalho com eles, tipo, não participei, não fiz nada, tipo, não entrei no grupo, não fiz nada, realmente não participei. E eu queria saber se tem como eu me alocar em algum outro grupo das próximas semanas. Eu já falei no grupo, inclusive, da sala sobre isso. Aí uma menina até ofereceu, falou que era para eu falar com você, mas eu acho que depende muito da quantidade de pessoas, né, dos grupos, para você me realocar se possível.
Qual foi o grupo que você falou, Maria?
O que eu tava, tecnicamente, era o de hoje, do grupo 1.
Mas
O que a minha...
É.
eu acho que é grupo 2 é o próximo. O nome dela é Juliana. Aquela que tava aqui, Juliana Simões.
Juliana Simões. Tá.
Mas não sei se tá cheio, não sei.
O grupo deles já tá cheio já. O grupo deles já tá com 8 pessoas. É uma situação difícil, viu? Eu não sei. Talvez. Talvez você tenha que fazer a prova substitutiva.
Porque todos os grupos têm 8 pessoas? É isso? Mas,
Não.
na verdade, professor, tem várias pessoas, tipo, que estão meio faltando, tipo, como os grupos foram meio aleatórios, muitas pessoas não se conhecem, e aí, tipo, tem pessoas que ainda não apareceram, então, com certeza tem vaga dessas pessoas, que nem a menina falou, que ela perguntou se podia botar o Bruno, porque tinham 2 vagas e tal. Isso aconteceu em todos os grupos, entendeu? Porque ninguém se conhecia, foi um pouco difícil.
Tudo bem, tudo bem. A Juliana falou que se você falasse comigo, eles aceitariam você lá no grupo?
Isso, ela falou ainda que estavam dividindo as partes e que podia me dividir uma parte comigo também.
Tá bom,
ela falou isso comigo.
Então faz o seguinte, Maria, confirma com ela, manda um e-mail para mim, com ela junto, e fala, olha, conforme a gente conversou, professor, eu vou participar do grupo 2, a Juliana que está em cópia aqui está de acordo e tal, e a gente vai seguir dessa maneira. Aí da minha parte não tem problema.
Professor, obrigada e desculpa, viu? Não queria que tivesse acontecido isso.
Não,
eu juro
tudo
que
bem.
Eu procurei, mas realmente não consegui.
Não, tudo bem, acontece.
Eu vou falar com a Juliana aqui,
tá? Mas
Muito obrigada.
Escreve esse e-mail.
O e-mail, Vou pedir o
isso.
e-mail dela aqui, eu só tenho o número dela no WhatsApp, não tenho o e-mail dela, tá?
Tá bom, beleza.
Obrigada.
Obrigado, tchau, tchau.
Obrigadão, professor. Até mais.
Imagina.
Tchau.
Tchau.